I never thought my biggest enemy would be a 50-some woman in a pastel cardigan who spent her days measuring the height of my lawn with a ruler, but that's exactly who Patricia Winters, or as everyone in Oak Estates call her HOA, Karen, turned out to be my troubles with. Patricia began the day I moved into my dream home after years of saving. I'd finally purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom house with a backyard pool in what I thought was a nice, quiet neighborhood. The realtor had mentioned there was a Homeowners Association, but assured me it was just the basics to keep property values up. What she failed to mention was that the HOA president ruled with an iron fist and had made it her personal mission to make everyone's lives as difficult as possible. Excuse me, a shrill voice called out as the movers were carrying my couch through the front door. I turned to see a woman with a perfectly styled blonde bob and an expression that suggested she just smelled something unpleasant. I'm Patricia Winters, president of the Oak Estates Homeowners Association. I noticed your moving truck is parked 6 and over the sidewalk. That a violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our community guidelines. I extended my hand, trying to make a good impression. Nice to meet you, Patricia. I'm James. Sorry about that. We'll move it right away. She ignored my outstretched hand and instead thrust a 3-inch binder at me. Here are the community guidelines. I suggest you read them thoroughly. We have a 3-strike policy for violations, and that truck counts as strike 1. She smiled thinly, her eyes cold as ice. Welcome to Oak Estates. That first encounter set the tone for the next 6 months. Nothing I did was ever good enough for Patricia. My garbage bins were visible from the street for 20 minutes after collection violation. I installed solar-powered garden lights along on my walkway without prior approval. Violation. I left my garage door open for an hour while organizing some boxes. You guessed it, violation. Each time Patricia would appear in my door, clipboard in hand, that same cold smile on her face as she documented my offenses. But the real trouble started when I decided to install a small gazebo next to my pool. I followed protocol to the letter, submitted the designs to the architectural review committee, waited for approval, hired licensed contractors. Everything was by the book. The committee, which Patricia wasn't part of, approved my plans unanimously. Construction began on a Monday, and by Wednesday the foundation was laid and the frame was going up. That afternoon, I returned from work to find Patricia in my backyard, taking photos of the construction and arguing with my contractor. I approached quickly, my patient already wearing thin. Is there a problem here, Patricia? I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite my growing frustration. She turned to me, eyes blazing. Indeed, there is. This structure exceeds a height restriction by aiding construction, needs to stop immediately. My contractor, Mike, a veteran builder who worked in this community for years, shook his head. Sir, we're building exactly to the approved specifications. The height is well within guidelines. Patricia's face flushed red. I'm the HOA president, and I say it's too tall. This needs to come down or we'll be facing daily fines. I took a deep breath. Patricia, the architectural committee approved these exact plans. If you have concerns, you should take them up with the committee. I don't need to consult with anyone, she hissed, stepping closer to me. As president, I have final say. This gazebo is an eyesore, and I won't allow it to bring down property values in our community. That's when clicked. My backyard wasn't visible from the street, only from Patricia's second floor bedroom window. This wasn't about community guidelines. It was about her personal view. I'd had enough of her bullying Patricia. I said calmly. The gazebo stays. It's been properly approved. If you have a problem with that, take it up through the proper channels. Now I'd appreciate it if you'd leave my property. Her eyes narrowed to slit you'll regret. This she said through clenched teeth. Before storming off, I didn't think much of her threat at the time. In retrospect, I should have taken it more seriously. The gazebo was completed the following week, a beautiful cedar structure that perfectly complemented my pool area. I hosted a small barbecue that weekend to celebrate, inviting a few neighbors who been friendly since I moved in. Everyone commented on how lovely the gazebo was and how it enhanced the backyard. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I was truly home. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. I woke up Monday morning and headed downstairs to make coffee before work. Looking out my kitchen window toward the pool, I froze, coffee mug slipping from my hand and shattering on the floor. My beautiful, crystal clear pool was now a murky brown disaster, and not just a little dirt. It looked like someone had dumped multiple wheelbarrows of soil and mulch into it. The water was completely opaque, and I could see potting soil floating on the surface. I rushed outside in my bathrobe, stunned by the destruction. The pool filter was making an alarming grinding noise, clearly struggling with the sudden influx of debris. As I stood therein, shocked, something caught my eye. A small trail of dirt leading from my pool across my lawn and toward the side gate. I followed it, noticing that it continued beyond my property line and led directly to Patricia's backyard, where a conspicuously empty garden bed and several empty bags of potting soil sat near her fence. My blood boiling, I immediately went back inside and called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the dirt trail and explained my ongoing issues with Patricia. They took photos and notes, but told me it would be difficult to prove who had dumped the dirt without direct evidence. Like security footage, they agreed to speak with Patricia, but warned me not to expect much. Next, I called my insurance company, who sent out a pool specialist. That afternoon, the news wasn't good. This is one of the worst cases I've seen. The technician said, testing the water and examining the filter system, the soil has completely overwhelmed the filtration system. There's extensive damage to the pump. The filters are destroyed, and based on what I'm seeing, there's likely damage to the pool liner as well. The entire system will need to be drained, cleaned, and partially rebuilt. My heart sank. How much are we talking about? He did some calculations on his tablet. Given the extent of the damage, the specialized cleaning required, the equipment replacement, and the labor, you're looking at around $115,000. I nearly fell over. $155,000. That was more than I'd spent on the gazebo that had triggered this whole nightmare. The insurance adjuster explained that while my homeowner's policy would cover vandalism, they would need to investigate first, and given the circumstances, they might pursue to the responsible party for reimbursement if they could be proven responsible. That evening, as I sat on my patio looking at my ruined pool, I noticed Patricia in her yard pruning roses with a self-satisfied smile on her face. She glanced over, saw me watching, and had the audacity to wave cheerfully. That's when I decided enough was enough. If the police couldn't help me and insurance would take forever, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. Legally, of course. For first thing the next morning, I called the security company and had cameras installed, cover my entire backyard. Then I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. After explaining my situation, he suggested 2 courses of action: file a civil suit against Patricia personally for the damages and petition the HOA board for her removal based on harassment and abuse of power. The civil suit is straightforward, he explained. If we can prove she damaged your property, she'll be liable for all repair costs plus possibly punitive damages. The whole matter is trickier. You'll need support from other board members and evidence of a pattern of behavior. That's when I realized I needed allies. Over the next week, I began talking to my neighbors, asking if anyone else had had problems with Patricia. It turned out I wasn't alone, not by a long shot. One neighbor had been fined for planting unauthorized flowers. Another had been harassed about their holiday decorations being up for 2 days longer than the guidelines allowed. A third had been threatened with legal action for painting their front door shade of blue that Patricia deemed too cobalt. Armed with their stories and support, I attended the next HOA board meeting. Patricia's face when I walked in was priceless, a mixture of shock and contempt. When the floor opened for community concerns, I stood up and calmly presented my case, including photos of my damaged pool, the dirt trail, and Patricia's suspicious empty garden beds. I then invited my neighbors to share their experiences one after another. The other board members listened with increasing discomfort as the stories piled up. Patricia tried to interrupt several times, her face growing redder by the minute, but the board vice president, a retired judge, firmly kept order. These are baseless accusations. Patricia finally sputtered when given a chance to respond. Mr. Reynolds is clearly upset about his pool, but he has no proof I had anything to do with it, and these other complaints are just people who don't want to follow the rules they agreed to when they moved here. The vice president frowned. Patricia, these are serious allegations from multiple homeowners. I move that we create an investigative committee to look into these complaints and Mr. Reynolds' vandalism claim. Patricia looked around the room, seemingly shocked that her fellow board members weren't automatically taking her side. The motion passed unanimously, excluding Patricia, who abstained, her hands trembling with rage. As the meeting adjourned, I approached her calmly. You know, Patricia, this all could have been avoided if you just followed the proper channels. Regarding my gazebo, now it's going to cost someone $155,000 to fix my pool. I wonder who that will be. She leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. You'll never prove anything. I smiled. We'll see about that. What Patricia didn't know was that my neighbor across the street had a security camera pointed at his front yard, which had incidentally captured footage of Patricia wheeling a garden cart filled with soil bags to my house at 5 a.m. on a morning of the incident. He'd only checked the footage after hearing about what happened to my pool. That, combined with the soil samples that matched the brands of the empty bags in her yard, created a compelling case. 2 weeks later, I received the judge for my civil suit. Patricia was legally responsible for all damages to my pool system, totaling $1,342.67. The HOA investigative committee had also completed their review and called a special community meeting to announce their findings. I arrived early and took a seat in the front row. Patricia sat at the board table, looking pale but still defiant. The room filled quickly worded spread, and no one wanted to miss the drama. The vice president called the meeting to order and solemnly read the committee's findings. After thorough investigation, including review of security footage, testimony from multiple residents, and documented evidence of guideline enforcement discrepancies, this committee finds that Patricia Winters has abused her position as HOA president, engaged in selective and vindictive enforcement of community guidelines, and most seriously committed an act of vandalism against another resident's property. We therefore recommend her immediate removal from the board and request that she personally cover all legal expenses incurred by the association during this investigation. The room erupted in applause. Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is outrageous, she shouted, her voice cracking. I've given 8 years to this Community, I maintain property values. I've kept this neighborhood pristine. The vice president remained calm. The committee's recommendation stands all in favor of removing Patricia Winters from her position as HOA president effective. Immediately, every hand in the room went up, including, I noticed with satisfaction, every member of the board. Patricia's face crumpled as she looked around the room, seemingly just now realizing how deeply unpopular her reign of terror had been. In the final dramatic gesture, she grabbed her designer handbag, knocked over her water glass, and stormed toward the exit. She paused only briefly as she passed my seat. "You'll be getting the check tomorrow," she said, her voice quivering with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "I hope you choke on your victory." Then she pushed through the doors and was gone as promised. A certified check for the full amount arrived the next day along with a terror note: repairs only, no further contact. I smiled as I deposited the check, thinking about how my new pool system would be even better than the original, and every time I'd sit in my gazebo and look at that sparkling water, I'd remember the look on Patricia's face when justice was finally served.